How's it going? If you are looking for more information about the student loan crisis, such as how it sort of began and how it sort of has grown over time and where we are or where we're going, then I recommend a documentary called Default, a student loan documentary. And this is free on several platforms and including YouTube, so I have included a link to that down below in the description. And before I go any further, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Drew, and on this channel I discuss higher education. So whether you are a future college student or the parent of a future college student, I talk about things that will help you choose a college or sort of things to consider once you become a college student. So even if you're a current college student, then this stuff is for you as well. And I discuss a lot of other things such as current events and sort of research and implications with higher education as a whole. So if that interests you, or if you like that, then make sure you subscribe. Now, with Default, the documentary, what was most interesting is it was released in 2012. And I think it really sort of was filmed around maybe 2010, 2011, maybe even 2009. They interviewed a lot of current students and a lot of graduates, and it sort of was sprinkled in between 2008, 2011, we'll say that. There were some references to the Great Recession of 2008, 2009. That's why I think it was a little bit earlier than the release year. And it's broken into, I would say, three themes, sort of the history, the impact, and then the fallout. And it's important, I think, to know this because when it talked about the history, it was talking about originally with the Higher Education Act in 1968, it was discussed as giving families with 2 or more kids in college a tax credit, and at the last minute that was actually changed to a federal loan that would be guaranteed funding to go to college. And I am not sure of the discussion yet of how that went down, but they didn't realize at the time that this would become the single greatest source of funding when it comes to tuition. And the documentary they have several different speakers, and they gave a great foundational explanation in saying not only did you have this, but at the time you could go to college and work part-time during the school year and then work full-time during the summer and really kind of cover all of your costs. And even then, decades ago with Pell Grants, that would cover about 3/4 of your cost of attendance. Whereas now I think you can probably buy books and maybe cover some class fees in 1 year with the Pell Grant that's being offered to you. So it really sort of looks at what it was intending to do and how it did not change and how everything else changed in our current reality of how that's not enough. When they talked about the impact, they were interviewing several current students. And all of these students were saying, I've taken out loans, but I've received scholarships, I work multiple jobs, and I still owe money. Keep in mind, this was in 2012. So it's only gotten worse, if not remain the same. And so there are so many students who are impacted by this, and they really share, and including you had certain graduates, and they talked about how they just wanted money because they didn't want to get kicked out of school, that they didn't know, just give me the money so I can go here and I can get my degree, and then I can start my ascent in life after graduation. And then there were some issues where there was one student in particular where she had gotten sick during a semester and she had to drop out of school to get surgery and start the road to recovery. But what was most frustrating is she still owed tuition for that and she could not get a refund. There was another student who had gone to law school. He had graduated and his first job out of law school was a modestly paying job, but it was in an area where it was very expensive to live. So he said his 2 choices were pay rent or begin payments on student loans. And with rent being so expensive, he opted to pay rent, and then he went into forbearance with his loans. And that's where we transition into sort of the fallout in the documentary. And a lot of people don't know. A lot of people don't know the fine print when it comes to financial aid, including forbearance. And if you're not familiar with forbearance, I really wouldn't call it an option, but it is an option where you can reduce your monthly loan payments or put them on hold altogether temporarily. But the caveat is that while this happens, the interest is still accruing. And these students that they talked to in the documentary didn't know that. And they didn't know that the interest went out of control. So you have several graduates that they've spoken to, several working professionals that are well in their 40s, saying, well, I originally owed $26,000 as an example, and I paid $9,000. And now after paying that, I owe over $50,000. And that is all because of the compounding interest. And so it really gives you numbers, and you can start to visualize how problematic that this can become. And they really point out too, there's no limit to interest or fees that can be added to your student loan payments. So there's really no incentive for lenders to limit how much you can borrow. And if you are a current student, or if you are a future student and you've looked at sort of financial aid packages, you'll see some very large amounts being offered to you. And it's very enticing because you think that's sort of a generous offer, but when you think about these fees and the interest, it's really benefiting the lender. And what was interesting, what stood out to me, and again, this was in 2012, they mentioned the Corinthian colleges. And I bring this up because recently, students who attended Corinthian colleges had their student loan debt forgiven. And this is relevant because even then, in this film, they were talking about how the colleges, the board, will say, for the Corinthian colleges were on a conference call with their investors. And they were talking about how they had given out $130 million in their own private loans to low-income students. But they knew 58% of those students were going to default on their loans. And it was almost sort of this bragging that they knew they were going to get their money. And that's where we get into this area that student loans are very predatory. And when I look at sort of this film and I compare it to the discussion today and what I had learned from the film, and some of you may not know this, is when it comes to bankruptcy, you can effectively wipe all of your debts clean except for student debt. And I think that's a testament to how influential the student loan industry is when it comes to politics. And when I look at when the film was made in 2012 to where we are now, we've gone through a few presidential administrations. We did have an introduction of the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, but we've gone through a few administrations. We've gone through a few swings of power in Congress, and yet nothing has happened and nothing has really changed. So realistically, while talk of this is heating up, I don't expect anything to happen just because historically nothing has. I hope I am wrong on this though. But if nothing does happen, then the question is, what do we do? What do we do as borrowers? What do we do as higher education professionals? How can we deal with this? We can't make it go away, so what do we do? Well, the only thing that I can really say with confidence is we need to educate ourselves. And as higher education professionals, we need to do a better job of educating our students when it comes to financial aid. There's so many little things that we don't want to think about or we don't want to know. Like one student said, I'm 18, 19 years old. I just need the money for tuition. I'll worry about the rest later. I don't care. I think we need to do our due diligence. Even though you may feel that way, we need to do a better job of sending the message that this is going to have some lifetime implications. So you really need to understand what you're about to do. And I don't want students to shy away from college because this is all we talk about in the news right now, because I think that is going to be detrimental to our society as well. So I think educating on what that means, how you can sort of navigate it, knowing what resources are available is just as important. So for example, not many knew about the federal loan forgiveness programs. So if you are doing public service for so many years, you can have your loans forgiven. Look for those sorts of programs. I actually noticed a lot of these things too in the comments. And tuition reimbursement or tuition reduction programs are another thing that I would recommend. So if you are a future student, or even if you're a current student, this is a great way to get your college paid for. How can you get your college paid for? Going into the military with the GI Bill is another great trade-off. in terms of getting your education paid for. There is the Starbucks College Achievement Plan, where they have the partnership with Arizona State University, where you can do a few programs through ASU online. That's one option of getting your tuition paid for. So really start to explore, how can someone else pay for my college education? Another thing I would recommend is save early and save often. And I know that kind of sounds like common knowledge, but I think if you can always have that in your mind and you can stay disciplined, you can start to make a difference. I know of some friends where they have said with their children who are very young, every year when it's their birthdays, they would say, in lieu of gifts, will you please donate to my child's college fund? So they can start to collect money and do a savings account over the years, which will help for tuition when it's time to go to college. I think another avenue is considering community college as well, because it is far cheaper than a four-year institution. I wouldn't say there is a lack of quality in the education received. I think there are other things in terms of operations that make it different from a four-year university, but the content itself, it's no different. So you're really not losing out on a quality of education when you go to a community college. And I do have a video, I will probably make more videos in the future about the value of community colleges. So absolutely keep that in mind as well. I think you also need to look at scholarship opportunities and apply for anything and everything that you can. And one tip or one piece of advice that I would give you is make sure you're filing a FAFSA. Even if you don't plan on taking out loans, make sure you have one on file, because a lot of scholarships are dependent upon you having a FAFSA on file. So if you did not complete a FAFSA, you may not be eligible for certain scholarships. So make sure you take care of that as well. I feel like that's sort of what I have for you today. If there are other strategies or tips to sort of make college more affordable or really mitigate what student loans are doing to you, please let me know. Let us all know in the comments down below. And let's go through this together. I know there are changes coming. I don't know how soon, but I'm optimistic and I'm hopeful, and I think we'll get through this. So if you like this video, make sure you share it, give it a like. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will catch you in the next one.